Okay.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the tutorial entitled Introduction to Fair Container-Based Workflows in Web Image Processing Pipeline. Here we are, Mylene, Simon, and Peter Bajcsy from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and we are gonna introduce the platform and plugins and plugin repositories. So the presentation consists of multiple parts. We will start with the introduction to Web Image Processing Pipeline, and then we'll show you how WIPP has been used in action for identification and quantification of the characteristics of stem cell preparations from a very large number of images. Then we will go into more hands-on parts, which is creating and running computational workflows in WIPP step by step as if you were a user. And then the part 3 will be building an algorithmic plugin. Then you can run in this environment, which is really step-by-step developers activity. Something about us, we are part of the National Institute of Standards and Technology that has a mission to promote US innovation and industrial competitiveness. And we were established in 1901. And we have about 5,000 people, out of them 3,000 PhDs, 5 Nobel Prizes since 1997. We are part of the Information Technology Lab, and our specific focus is on reproducibility of scientific computations for metrology. We design computational environments, data and metadata formats, and application programming interfaces so scientists can reproduce their measurements. We all know that scientific reproducibility is a major challenge. So let's start to talk about the Web Image Processing Pipeline, what it is. We would start with the challenges that we were presented before. Sometimes you see on the market there are many workflow engines, Taverna, Kepler, Pegasus, or Cell Profiler. All these people are trying to address some of these technical challenges that are listed on this slide. One of them is that the microscopes are becoming more and more automated, which means that they generate more and more data, and data handling in terms of volume, value, variety, and veracity is a challenge. You typically would want to buy hardware resources or go to the cloud so you can manage the volume of the data and perhaps do some real-time measurements. Of course, the cost of the infrastructure is huge, so people are looking for open source solutions. That's what we are trying to do for the community of biomedical researchers. When you finally get your data processed and handled, then you want to share it with the community. The traceability and reproducibility are critical. So we are looking at computational steps, parameters, can we capture everything so the computations can be reproduced. And of course, all these computations should be giving you very high accuracy measurements and low uncertainty following, let's say, the guide to the expression of uncertainty measurement GUM. In addition, all these measurements should be quantitative and trusted. Many times, especially in biomedical fields, people like to do qualitative analysis. We are looking for computations that would give you multiple metrics. They are quantitative and trusted and robust. If you deal with any patient data, then security is a key. So how do you put into all these computational environments security, monitor for vulnerabilities, and then provide patches? And then finally, if you are a developer, you would like to replace some existing code or algorithm with your own code. You are looking at code that is written in many programming languages. How do you make it interoperable? That is what we are concerned with. And of course, sometimes you are used to working on your laptop with small amount of data, so you want to have everything interactive, which is much bigger challenge when you deal with terabytes of data. So these are all the challenges that typically you see in workflow engines and people who design environments. We took 3 different perspectives on this problem. It's the perspective of the user who just wants to upload data, create some computational workflows, and visually explore results and take all the quantitative results. The developer says, oh, I have a better algorithm than what is existing, what is already on the market. Can I create and package my algorithm, put it into the computational workflow, and then debug if there is any issue? And then, of course, you have the system administrator who says, well, you are trying to process terabytes of data. I can use my computational resources, whether it's a GPU or a CPU cluster, or it's a computer cloud. Can I just launch the computations that you are giving me as a user and manage everything? Based on these three perspectives, we invested a lot of effort into designing something which we call WIPP platform. It's an open source, web-based algorithmic plugin platform for distributed computations. You can launch jobs in a computer cluster or computer cloud. It's all is ready. The source code is available at the URL. If you are a developer and you would like to add your own computation, you can design web plugins. These are interoperable, containerized algorithmic plugins that come together with some manifest or a JSON file that describes what that container does, what the inputs are and outputs are. And then you have the last piece, which is the WIPP plugin registry. That is when you are looking for algorithms that you can chain together and create workflows that will allow you to search for them and share your algorithms with the community. And then again, there is a pointer to the source code repository. This is all meant for federated, distributed searches when you are looking for tools and building workflows. I'll hand it over to Mylene.
Hi, so I'm going to introduce you to these three concepts, tools and systems that consist of the WIPP ecosystem, as we call it. So I'm going to start with the WIPP plugins. So what is a WIPP plugin? And we are trying to really design WIPP plugins around the FAIR principle, so they are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And the plugin is a containerized computational software. So it's in fact a Docker image, a container image that we build around an algorithm, for example, that we have. And then on top of that, we associate a plugin manifest in a JSON format. And the plugin manifest is really here to describe what the plugin does, provide some metadata about the plugin, like who is the author, institution, where is the code repository, some website, maybe a citation, and what is the container image that is associated with this plugin. And then we described inputs. So does it take an image collection? Does it take maybe an AI model as an input or something? And then outputs. So what will be the output of the computation? And we also have an UI description section where we can add some extra information for the display in a web environment. So also part of WIPP is the actual WIPP platform. So this is a web-based platform that is designed around the client-server system. So you have a backend, you have a front end, and other components. And it's meant to be scalable. It is open source, so the code source is on GitHub. And it is meant for distributed image processing computation, trusted measurement, and online data exploration. So some of the features that we have in WIPP, so we have private workspaces for the users. So user can upload their data, they can download results from the online platform. They can also configure data visibility. So they start with everything private, and if they want to share some of the data with others, they can make some data public. We also have online configuration of computational workflows, and the execution will be remote. So we can configure a workflow on the web browser in the WIPP application, and then it will be executed remotely. And the workflows, as we mentioned, are using WIPP plugins. So it's a containerized computational plugins. We also have some data exploration tools. So in the web browser, so we have, for example, deep zoom view of really large images. So you can zoom in, zoom out a bit like Google Maps. And also some other interactive visualization that we provide in the WIPP platform. WIPP is also AI enabled, so we can enable GPU support. We have TensorBoard integration, so if you are using TensorFlow in your plugins, then you can monitor through TensorBoard. And we also have some image annotation tools. And we really try to design the WIPP platform so that it could be deployed on a variety of infrastructure. So it is cloud agnostic. So you could deploy it on Kubernetes, on premises, or in the cloud. So it is based on container and container orchestration technologies such as Docker and Kubernetes. Some examples of what we can do in WIPP. Some example of workflow would be if you want to train a model and then you want to infer segmentation using this train model. So you will have a simple two-step workflow where you start by training and then you would do inference. And the workflow representation in WIPP is in the DAG format. So you can, from the web UI, create your workflow, then click on monitor. You get to monitor the execution from this dashboard. And then once everything is done, you can check the results. More information about some of the visualization tools that we have in WIPP. The main one is this 2D pyramid deep zoom view. So if you have a really large image, then we can enable this deep zoom view where you can zoom in and zoom out. And this is part of the WIPP platform, but it's actually a separate toolkit that can also be downloaded and installed from this GitHub repository and used in other projects. So this is an open source toolkit that we provide. And more recently, we also started to add traceable statistical histogram visualization. So this is this view where you can, from image features and from actual images, you can then display histograms of the features. So behind the scenes of the WIPP platform, in terms of portability and reproducibility. So as we mentioned, it is really based on container and container orchestration technologies. So everything is containerized. The WIPP platform, all of the components are containerized in the form of Docker images. The plugins, computational plugins themselves are also Docker images. And to orchestrate all of that, we use Kubernetes. And as I mentioned, it could be deployed on-prem. So this is what we do here at NIST. We deploy it on our own server, but we have also some collaborators that deploy on AWS or OpenStack. Now I'm going to quickly present the WIPP architecture. So what are the main components of the WIPP platform, how it was designed? Let's start with the main component, which is what we call the WIPP backend. So this is a REST API for WIPP. This is a Java Spring Boot based REST API, and it will really handle a lot of things in WIPP. It will do metadata and data handling. So in WIPP, you can upload images, for example. So if you upload images, then the backend will save metadata about these images in the database. If you create new jobs and new workflow, this is also the backend that will handle saving this configuration, monitoring execution, and so on. Also, it will handle conversion of images to the standard OMI-TIFF format that we use in WIPP. And it will handle everything that happened in the workflow in terms of importing results, converting configuration to the format of workflow that we use, etc. So next to that, communicating with the REST API, we have a web UI, and this is an Angular application. So this is the part that the user will see in their browser. User can upload data, access the uploaded data, and also the data that were generated during workflow execution. So we have multiple file data formats that we handle in WIPP, so image collection, stitching vectors if you have field of view that you want to stitch together. So the pyramid for the deep zoom visualization, AI models, CSV files, and more. So you can, through the browser, upload large collections of images and CSV files. You can view all of the plugins that are registered in this WIPP instance. You can configure workflows of image processing tasks. You can then monitor the execution of these workflows, and you can view and download the results. You can also play with the data visibility of data, and you can also access the spatial visualization, such as the deep zoom web that I was mentioning before. To handle users in WIPP, we use an identity and access management solution. So this is KeyCloak. It is open source. It enables single sign-on. So this is what we use to handle users in WIPP. We also have a database that handles all of the metadata in WIPP, so job configuration, metadata about data objects, and register plugins. And it is a MongoDB database. And then we also have the data volume. So this is where all of the images and files are stored. And finally, so what we use to handle workflow in WIPP is called Argo Workflow. So it's a Kubernetes native workflow management system. It is open source. It is container native workflow engine. So it will distribute the jobs across Kubernetes cluster nodes. You can have step or DAG-based workflows. So we use the DAG version. It will launch the containers with all of the provided parameters and the data volumes. It allows for monitoring the execution. It has a nice dashboard that we can look at. And it also provides a lot of features that we use in WIPP. And something more recent that we are currently working on is to add also a IIIF image server. So IIIF stands for International Image Interoperability Framework. So it allows to serve images in a more efficient way. And we are currently exploring 2 backends, so Cantaloupe and WIPP. So now we talked about plugins and the WIPP platform. So as we were developing WIPP and adding more and more plugins, we realized that we needed a way to share these plugins with the community, to have a more efficient way of searching plugins and storing plugins. So this is when we decided to create the WIPP plugin registry. And actually to do that, we leverage another tool that is developed at NIST, which is a configurable data curation system, also called the CDCS. So it's really also centered around these FAIR principles. And it allows to create really data curation system from an XML schema, so you can kind of configure it for your own data. And so with the WIPP plugin registry, we are trying to address the challenge of finding and sharing reusable computational plugins and workflows of software heterogeneous algorithms. And it is based on the CDCS. It allows for the FAIR data principle. We also have OAI-PMH enabled, so it means that if you have multiple plugin registries that are deployed at different institutions, for example, we can then federate them, they can exchange information. So when you search for plugin, you can search across multiple instances of the plugin registry. And coming next, we will also enable GH4GH to registry API, so we can even have more interoperability with our plugin registry. So this is what the plugin registry looks like. So if you go to wipplugins.nist.gov, you can find a list of some of our plugins. You can sort by plugins, by type of plugin, if they deal with 2D images, if what type of processing task, if it's segmentation, for example, you can filter like that with the filters that are on the left, then you get the result. And once you find a plugin that you like, then you can click on it to get all of the information about this plugin and also a link to the manifest that you can use to register the plugin in WIPP. Some representations that we use in WIPP. So in terms of data types, so for image files, we mostly use tiled omitif. So OMI stands for Open Microscopy Environment. So this is a format that is really used in the community. Some metadata that we use are using comma separated values, so CSV. We have stitching vector, so if we want to stitch images, we use TXT for that. In terms of pyramids for deep zoom view, we currently use a deep zoom DZI format, but because we are integrating the IIIF framework into our platform, we will now switch to pyramidal TIFF. We also have generic data, so if you have a data that is not really fitting in any of the categories that we already manage in WIPP, you can put it in the generic data collection, and it could be any format. In terms of AI models, natively we support TensorFlow because we also have a TensorBoard integration, but WIPP doesn't really enforce any format on AI models. So if you have PyTorch or other formats, we can also use that in WIPP. And in terms of containers, so WIPP is container-based, so we have containers and we try to manage the size for transfer efficiency. We try to follow best practices for containerization. And also container allow for interoperability of software algorithms. And we do have a workshop on that that already happened, and another one coming that Peter is going to talk about in a few minutes. In terms of workflows, we use a DAG representation, and currently we use Argo workflows as our backend workflow engine. We also have a feature for CWL export. In terms of interfaces, so for cloud container scaling, so we use Kubernetes. We are based on Argo. Previously, we had a version that was using htCondor and Pegasus for the job scheduling. For HPC, so we are testing some integration with Slurm so that you could run Slurm jobs from WIPP. In terms of API standards, so we have a REST API, so we follow the principle for that. It is a HOS REST API. We also have an open API specification for the REST API. Current work, as I mentioned, is to integrate AAAF framework API support. And in terms also of federated search, we do use a OIPMH standard in the WIPP registry. And we are integrating the GH4GH to registry API. Peter, do you want to talk about?
Yes, in addition, we understand the value for the community. So we are trying to collaborate with NCATS, NIH on plugin development. They have a large team and they have a system called Polus, and they have a repository. They also are deploying the WIPP plugin registry. So again, if they develop plugins, we develop plugins, we can share them and create workflows by combining the development effort at multiple institutions. We deployed WIPP at NIH, other NIH institutes, at Cardiff University, Georgia Tech, and so forth. We try to bring the community together because it takes the whole community to create something reproducible. We are organizing a workshop. This is a second workshop on the FAIR containerized computational software, which is going to be in December. And what we are trying to discuss with the community is really the definition of the manifest, so everybody can share the code packaged into these containers with the manifest that has certain attributes, and therefore everybody can rerun it. It doesn't have to be running in WIPP; it can be running on other platforms. We just want to make sure that these containers are chainable and reusable. Let's go to the next part. So we probably overwhelmed you with a lot of considerations that we had when we were designing WIPP plugins and the WIPP plugin registry. Let's see how it really works, and we will just show you one example. So if we work with biologists on measurement of stem cell pluripotency, this is a more or less industrial problem. When you create many replicates, how do you assure that the quality of the replicates is the same? In this case, we have, I'm going to show just some a live demo of some data that we have processed using WIPP. The challenge is that when you are looking at these data sets, you have, let's say, 3 replicates of stem cell colonies growing in a 10-centimeter dish over a period of 5 days. So you will take about, let's say, 135, 161 time points per replica. At each replica, because it's a 10-centimeter dish, you will have lots of fields of view that are partially overlapping. And then you have to create a composite image, which is about 22,000 by 20,000 pixels. Clearly, it's much larger than anyone's laptop screen. You have to figure out how to use the deep zoom so people can zoom in, zoom out, and pan. And you are looking at phase contrast and fluorescent channels. So now you have to overlay and see what is the meaning of the channel. Let's say in this case, it was the measurement of the pluripotency. So the computational problem is to quantify all these temporally and spatially varying segments. The end goal is when you are creating these replicates in bio generators, you want to know whether the cell colonies, let's say, are healthy. In this case, if the green color in this picture corresponds to a colony that had consistently high concentration of, or was expressing the OCT4, which means that it was a pluripotent. But if you look at the whole dish, now you can say, well, is this going to be a good regenerative medicine for a patient, as opposed to if everything is green? So let me just show you a live demo. We go to, I think we were here. So let's put it into the maximum. Can we put it into maximum? I think it's here. Oh no. Can you put it into maximum?
Okay,
Okay, so here we are looking at 1 out of 161 time points. You can see this is a phase contrast, one colony at time point 6. And if you want to see, let's say you want to see the corresponding GFP colony, the OCT4, you can look at it. If you want to say, okay, how is it changing? How is the appearance of the colony changing between phase contrast and GFP? You can overlay them. And of course, we are doing processing where we are taking the phase contrast image and we are computing segmentation. How do we know that the segmentation is correct? You can go and then check if the boundary of the segmentation that you computed is good. And of course, we have a qualitative, and so this is a qualitative evaluation, but we also have quantitative evaluation. Many times when you are doing explorations, the image might have, let's say, low contrast. So you want to, let's say, look at the images and enhance the contrast, or you want to do some other enhancement. So we provide you in browser different filters. So for example, here we can say increase exposure. So now if I am going to look at, let's say, this particular colony, I can increase exposure or decrease exposure. If I want to see that, if I want to invert, let's say, the value, because that would be better for me to see, I can invert. I can also create kind of a on-demand workflow in my sequence of image enhancing operations, right? So I can decide if I want to first do the exposure and then invert, or I first want to do the invert and then exposure. We also extracted some of these measurements. These are, I'm showing this because WIPP was used on the back end to compute this data, and we are trying to create a seamless transition from the computational part to the sharing part. So this you can export from WIPP and put it on your publicly facing web server, and then people can, and you can share it with people. You can see here, we, for example, compute some of the features. You can see intensity and texture features and so forth. This can be also searched from a different viewpoint where you see only the features, and you can say whether you want to look at the multiple features, multiple colonies. You can compare them. You can sort them. And again, everything is linked, so you can go back and see the colony that you want. As I mentioned in the PowerPoint slides, the end goal was to really characterize each replica as a whole, and for that we have created these visualizations where you can see each colony is classified based on the homogeneity of the OCT4 channel, which means we put there, we tile more or less the colony, and when we decide whether it's homogeneous or heterogeneous. So in the left upper corner, you see all the colonies that are homogeneous. In the right upper corner, you see all the heterogeneous colony, and at the bottom, you see all the colonies that didn't express the OCT4. The red and green here indicates that some of them were visually verified, so they formed a ground truth data set, and the rest was automatically assigned. The position here just reflects what was the degree of homogeneity. You can also see here, we see probability that each colony is homogeneous, heterogeneous, or dark. Eventually, when it goes to a production, you would like to have some kind of understanding over time. So that was one time point before, but now you are looking how each colony over time was either homogeneous, or it was switching between heterogeneous and homogeneous, or it was dark. And you can zoom in. So So it would be ideal if this colony would be completely green. So I'll stop here. And we can go back.
Yeah, so this is also another visualization that we have. This is called the statistical modeling toolkit. So this is for the same data set. So actually another replica from the same data set that Peter was just showing. So you can see that we can have a nice histogram of all the colonies based on the features. So here we selected mode. We can select the number of beans. We could select another feature, maybe median or something, and it will rearrange. And you can also add some filters. So let's say I don't want some of this colony, I want to remove them, and then it will update the histogram. What you can also do from here is show some stat info on the histogram. So you get some of the computation described here. You can also display the model from here. Yeah, you get the citation and also some extra information here. And okay, go back to this one. And also you can estimate the PDF parameters. Okay, so this one didn't have, but and then what you can do if you want to publish this, you can take a snapshot of the histogram. And what that will do, okay, let me just move the zoom thing. So you can then open this and you will get an HTML file with the histogram. And then you can click and go back to each colony that is part of the histogram. So this can be nice to include in some external websites or publication.
And that gives you the provenance, so you can now link your analyses with your persistent data set, and therefore other people can go back and then check your work.
Okay. So let me now go here. Start the slideshow again. So now we are going to, so we showed you some results from WIPP that we can then embed into external web pages and so on. But now I'm going to show you how you can, in WIPP, create and run computational workflows. So it will be kind of a step-by-step user perspective on a typical workflow. So for this example, we are going to use this data set. So we have small field of view that we want to stitch. So it's a 5x5 grid. We have two channels, so phase contrast and a fluorescent CY5 channel. This data set is available from one of our GitHub repositories, so it's NIST. So we'll find this data set if you want to try it on your own. So this is a pattern for stitching. So we have 5 rows, 5 columns, so we want to stitch them together. So we have a bunch of small files, and then we want to stitch them into this big field of view. So what would be the steps that we want to do with the data set? So we want to upload both channels to the WIPP system. In terms of computational workflow, we want to stitch both the phase contrast images and the fluorescent images into this bigger field of views. We want to build pyramids so that we can do a deep zoom visualization. We want to segment, for example, the fluorescent images. We want to extract some image features from the segments. And then we want to visualize all of these results. So we want to visualize the stitch images. We want to also overlay multiple channels and the mask so we can check the accuracy of the segmentation. And we might want to do also this statistical modeling visualization that we just demonstrate to get the histogram of the features. So first step would be to upload the images. So this is what the image collection view looks in WIPP. So you are able to add some files. You can also add a full folder. You can drag and drop in this area. And then the images will be uploaded to the system and they will be automatically converted to omitive tile formats. You have some option. You can download the dataset, delete it, lock it so that you know that you cannot add or remove files and it's ready for computation. You can also share it with everyone that has access to the WIPP system. Then you will want to create your computational steps in the workflow view. So here we have all of the steps of this workflow. So we do some stitching to get all of the positions of the small files in the grid. Then we assemble the bigger field of view. We want to do a pyramid representation of one channel and the other channel. We want to do segmentation. We also want to extract some features. We want to do a pyramid visualization of the mask, and we also want to look at the features from the segmentation. So one of the steps of this workflow would be to do stitching, and for that we have a stitching plugin that is based on NIST. So NIST stands for Microscopy Image Stitching Tool. So this is a tool that comes from NIST, and it's also available as an image FEG plugin, so it can be used in that environment and also as a WIPP plugin. It's available also the source code on GitHub. So this is what the stitching vector will look like. It will display the position of each smaller image in the grid. So then we have an assembly plugin that will use the stitching vector and the set of tiles to assemble the image. Then we want to do segmentation. So for that, we can use one of our plugins as well, which is based on empirical gradient threshold. So we will get a mask as a result. So binary image from your raw image, where 0 would be the background and 1 would be the foreground, so the stated image objects in the image. And then we want to look at the images that were produced by the different plugins, right? So we'll use the deep zoom viewer for that, and we can, as Peter demonstrated before, we can adjust the filter to adjust the visualization on the fly. And since we have multiple channels and also masks, then we might want to layer all of that and look at them, play with transparency, etc. We also computed features, so we'll get CSV file as a result of that, and we can, from the CSV collection detail view, see all of the files that were generated, and we can also download them. And something that is kind of in preview because it will be part of the next release for WIPP is statistical modeling. So from this CSV file of image features and from the raw images, we can get an histogram representation of our features. So let me now show you what it will look like in a real demo of WIPP. So let me go back to the beginning of WIPP. Let me just move this one. So this is what you see when you go to the WIPP system. So this is our internal instance. What I see here, because I'm not logged in, I'm seeing all of the data that is public. So data that we have uploaded and made public for other WIPP users to use. If I log in, then because we are using Keycloak, we can integrate identity provider into the system. So in our case, we are going to use our NIST authentication provider. So we have image collection. So under data, you can see all of the data formats that we handle. Here under plugins, you can see all of the plugins that were registered in this instance. So we can have multiple plugins, like the same plugin with multiple versions. You can search by name. You can also have multiple page of plugins. So this is where you see all of your plugins. And if I look, for example, of this one, a Resonate 50 classification plugin, you will see all of the information about this plugin that is coming from the plugin manifest, which is a JSON file that we attach to all of our plugins. So you can see here who was the author, the version, the name, source code, and all of the inputs of this plugin, as well as the outputs. And if there are any hardware requirements, we can also have that as part of the plugin manifest. And then we have the workflow view. So this is where we have all of our workflows. And then from here, you can see the workflow that was already executed. You can click on each step. You will get which plugin was used for this step. You can check the input. So here you can go back to the image collection. So it was a collection of one image. And you can also have a direct link to the output. So here, for example, it's a pyramid, so I can click on it, and then it will display the view of the computed deep zoom pyramid. So let me kind of walk you through the typical steps. So I will start with creating a new image collection. So let me call it like that. We have some options. So the current version of WIPP that is available for the public, we have browser upload, but we are testing other options of data ingestion, such as data ingestion from S3 buckets, from Google Drive, and also a backend import, like if you have a file sitting on a NAS or on the server and you want to import them directly. So this is for on-prem deployments.
So this is for the case when you have terabytes of data and you don't want to go through the browser. There is a way how to put the data directly on the backend.
Okay, so I created my new collection. I want to add some files to this collection. So let me go to a simple set of images. So if I have a small collection of images, for example, here, so I have some tiles. So this is the same dataset that I was showing previously. So I can select all of the tiles that I want to add them, and then they will be uploaded. And as they are uploaded, they will be converted to the .omi.tif format and tiled for better efficiency during computation. Once I'm here, I could like remove an image if I want. I could check the metadata of the image, download the image. I can also delete the collection, lock it, download it, etc. Now, in terms of workflows, so what I can do, for example, if I have this workflow, so this one is a workflow that was already executed, but what I could do is to copy it. I can give it a new name. And now I get a fully editable workflow. So I can check each step to see what are the input, output. You see now they are not hyperlinked because this workflow is not executed yet. And you see also that it displays that this one as an input is using the output of a previous step. So what I can do is to modify a step. So here I have some feature computation as a computational step. I'm using a plugin that we have developed here at NIST. But maybe what I want to do is instead to use another feature extraction plugin. So I want to delete this one, and then I want to add a new task, select which plugin I want to use. So I want to use Nixus. So Nixus is a plugin that was developed by our collaborators at NIH and CATS, and they do have a talk about this algorithm. I believe it's this afternoon at 1 p.m. if you are interested. So I want to use this one. So I want to say that it's Nixus features. So I can type in a name. So all of the output from this job will have this name embedded. As a label image collection, I want to use something that I computed as part of this workflow. So I want to use the result of the labeling job. And then as an intensity, I just want to use the result of the stitch image, the stitching job. I will want to use all of the files, the image that are part of my collection. I can leave that as default, and I want to do basic morphology. Let's say I want to get bounding box of each object. I want to get the centroids, pixel area, and all of that. And then I want to get one CSV per image. So we can do that. I can add the task, so you see it updates the graph. And then what I can do is submit the workflow. And once it's submitted, I can go to Argo and monitor the execution in real time. So it will go into a pending phase while the Argo management system is downloading the containers and all of that. And then we can look at the logs of each step. So you can see the first two stitching steps were succeeded. So we can look at what happened. So it was, populating some metadata and so on, doing.
So if you are debugging, the log files are very useful. You can see what went wrong.
So you can look at that while it's happening, or you can go back after the execution and look at it. So we can let that run for a few seconds, but then go back to here and look at the one that was already executed. So if you see this one, we saw that we can, from each job, we can look at the input. We can also go to the output. So we saw some of the pyramids. But now we have one pyramid per channel. So we have a pyramid for the fluorescent channel, we have one for the phase contrast channel, and we have one for the mask. So what we want to do is really to overlay these three different views so we can check accuracy and all of that. So for that, we have what we call pyramid visualizations. And what you can do is you can configure multiple layers in your visualization based on the pyramids that we are creating during the workflow. And then it allows you to select multiple layers. So here I'm seeing the fluorescent layer. I might want to switch to phase. I might want to overlay fluorescent. I can also select a color. So let's say I want to display it as kind of green, yellow. So this is it. So I can then play with the transparency of this layer. So I want to see full fluorescent, or I want to see phase contrast, and kind of play with the transparency like that. I maybe also want to check on the segmentation results, right? So I want to click on mask, add a new color for this one. So let's say red. And then you can, again, play. So this is a segmented mask, and you can check, is it accurate with the original images? So you can see, looks pretty good here. So on top of that, we can do some of the filters that Peter was displaying just before. So we also have the filtering enabled here. So if we want to, let's say, do something about exposure, so we can modify it a bit, and it will update the view as it goes. And we could also do some connectivity analysis and things like that. So if we have some mask, maybe we can do, we want to do some connectivity analysis on that. And then we get some, you know, some of the detected segment and some feature for each detected segment.
So the browser, these are all browser computations. They are really trying to replace the interactivity that you lose when you are dealing with terabytes of data. If you have all the data that you want to process, you run that from here. You launch the workflow. If you just want to play with the parameters, then we have some support in the browser using the deep zoom.
Yeah. And so we can see that the workflows that we were running before just succeeded. So from here, we could see like all of the steps, click on logs and all of that. And from WIPP, we can go to all of this input, output. So here we are using Nexus, so we can go to the output. We can see that we got a CSV file. We could download it and then open it and like look at the actual CSV file. And then what we are integrating in the new version is the statistical modeling toolkit. So from the same data set and features, and we can see that we can organize as an histogram, and we can select some filters that we want to do. So if we have the full histogram, it looks like that. So maybe I want to remove some of the ones that I think might be outliers, like remove that, and then I get this histogram. And I can see them also in this view. I can zoom in, and then it will filter based on where I am in this view. So let me go back to the slide here. Okay, so let me go back in slideshow mode. So we looked at this workflow and how we can do things in WIPP. So this workflow, I mean, a really similar one with just one channel is described step by step on our GitHub repo. So github.com organization US-NIST-Gov in the WIPP repository. So we have some tutorials there, some user guides, and this is one of the tutorials under the data folder, the test workflow. So it has the same steps, so it can be reproduced on a fresh install of WIPP. Now, the last part of this tutorial will be about how to build an algorithmic plugin so that it can be added to the WIPP platform. and can use in workflows. So it will be step-by-step this time perspective for developers. So first, kind of reminding what is a WIPP plugin. So it's a code package in a Docker image, and then we have this JSON plugin manifest file that describes inputs, outputs, and general information. And when you were seeing in the WIPP platform, like the list of inputs, the list of outputs with hyperlinks, so all of that is generated on the fly from the plugin manifest for each plugin. So we have some documentation available. So we have this fair chain compute container repository where we try to put like the schema of the plugin manifest, some examples. We have a tutorial. So what I'm going to show is also available on this repository. And on the WIPP general repository, so the US-NIST-Gov/WIPP, we have a list of plugins, so it's also a good thing to kind of look at the list of existing plugins and maybe find the ones that looks like what you're trying to achieve and just tweak it a bit to get your plugin. So if we go back to an algorithmic WIPP plugin, so first it's a Docker image. So if you have existing code, you will want to create a Docker file. So for example, if you have a Python code and you will start from a Python image, so this is standard Docker file commands. You might want to install some Python libraries. You will create your execution dir. You will put your script in it, and then you have an entry point. So this is the command line that will run your executable in the Docker image. And then you might want to push your image to a container registry. So for us, we mostly use Docker Hub, but others are available such as Quay. GitHub also has a Docker container registry, so that's an option. So if we look a bit more in depth into the plugin manifest JSON file, so we have multiple sections. So the first section is more about information, metadata about the plugin. So we have name, we have a version. So all of the plugins are versioned. So this means that you can have a plugin with multiple versions of it. In the WIPP instance, we have a title that will be displayed on the web UI. You can add some author, institution, a code repository, website, citation, a small description about what is your plugin. This is also going to be displayed in the WIPP interface, and then you specify which Docker image or which container image is the actual code plugin that is going to be running. Then you specify inputs and outputs. So this will be used by the WIPP system to link together the plugins in a workflow, and also to display all of the UI about inputs and outputs in the workflow views. So for example, here we have a collection of images as an input. We have a threshold value as an input, and as an output, we will get another collection of images. UI is to get additional information to display on the form when you create new jobs. So you might want to put some helpers for the user, such as pick a collection or start typing a name or something like that. So this is really for the UI part. So if you want to from your existing script to have it as a WIPP plugin, there are some general guidelines that we have in order to make the plugin as interoperable as we can. So for example, one standard that we follow in WIPP is that if it's a plugin, for example, that processes images, it should be able to operate on a folder, so it can go through all of the images of the folder. For example, a segmentation plugin should be able to log through all of the images of the input folder and then output all of the segmented image in a separate output folder that is specified in the command line interface. We like the default image format to be tiled TIFF and tiled omiTIFF, and the tile size that we use in WIPP is 1024 by 1024. In order to be able to run in WIPP, the executable should be able to run headless from a command line, so we cannot integrate things that are a desktop application, for example, with a GUI. So it should be really able to run from a command line and accept CLI arguments. And the format that we are using for that is --, the argument name, and then the value. In Python, for example, you can use argparse to get this type of CLI Best practices, so kind of the general ones, logging is good, doing some sanity checks for input, avoid doing computation for nothing, right? So if you check at the beginning of the code, then you might avoid wasting computational time. Open source, so we always like open source, so putting the code on GitHub, for example, is good, and organized and commented code. Some examples, so if we have, for example, a Python code that will do thresholding of a collection of images based on the threshold value that is manually inputted. So we can, with rparse in Python, create a CLI argument parsing. So we can say the name of the program, get some description that will appear in the help, and then we define our arguments. So input images, threshold value, and then the third argument will be the output folder for the results. And then with rparse, you will get all of the values from what the user inputted in your code. So following with this simple example, so you can get the list of images, for example, using listdir from the input image folder path. And then we'll do a simple thresholding on all of the images. So we'll loop through the images, print some logs, open the image, threshold it, and then save it as an 8-bit file in the TIFF file format with tiles that are 1025 by 1025, and then do some prints. So from this simple Python code that does thresholding, how do you Dockerize it? So you will need to have something to use containers. So for example, Docker. Docker on Linux, you can install it. Docker on Mac and Windows, usually you need a license. And once you install Docker, you could test your installation, do a Docker run. And for writing Docker file, you would want to look at the official Docker images for your target language as a good starting point, and look at the guidelines for writing Docker files. So this is an example of a simple Docker file from this Python code that does thresholding. So we create some folders, and this is where, for example, /data, where the data would be mounted inside of the container, so it's accessible for processing. So we create all of these folders, we install a few simple Python libraries, we copy the script from your machine to the container, and then we define the entry point. In our case, it will be Python threshold.py, because this is the name of our Python script. Some best practices so for creating your Docker file. So the image should be following the Open Container Initiative image format specification for interoperability. When we are using Docker and Docker files, so we can check the Docker best practices. So they have a nice online document that we can follow. And also because we are trying to build things that can be run in multiple environments, we try to make sure that our plugins are also compatible with Singularity, so that if the plugins are running in an HPC environment, then usually it's Singularity that is installed and not Docker. And Docker image can be running in Singularity, but there are a few best practices to keep in mind, such as not putting things in the home directory or the temp directory, because usually it's mounted automatically on the containers in Singularity. Not using workdir, because it's often not interpreted in Singularity. And also, so you can use full pass in the entry point or command instructions. So once you have your Docker file created, then you want to build your Docker image. So for example, with Docker, that will look like Docker build dots, because we are in this format. So this is why it will look for the Docker. In this folder, it will look for the Docker file. -t means that you are going to tag your image with a specific name. So usually the format will be my organization or my username / repo name, and with version. So example for a WIPP plugin would be WIPP / WIPP plugin Python /, and then the version would be 0.0.1, for example. So this is the example. So this one is available. So it's a tutorial that's available on our website on GitHub, and this is the outline of the folder. So you have the Docker file. On the same level, you have the plugin.json, some sample data for testing, and then under src, you have the threshold.py code. Once you have Dockerized your code, you may want to test it before you push it. So you can do Docker run. -v means that you are going to mount a folder that is on your machine inside of the container, because by default, your container will not have access to the files that are on your machine. So you can use that so that you say, in this location where I am, in my console, I have some sample data that I want to mount in the container under /data. I want to use this Docker image that I just built, and these are my parameters. So input parameter, threshold, and output location. If you were to use Singularity, you could also use the same type of command with Singularity, but the -v will be replaced by -b because this is for the bind command in Singularity. Once you're happy with your testing and so on, you can push the image to a container registry. So, for example, if you are using Docker Hub, you will want to Docker login first and then do Docker push of the image that you just created. And then it will appear here, and then it will be available to use in WIPP or in other systems. Now I'm going to talk a bit more about what is more specific to WIPP, which is the plugin manifest. As I mentioned, we have some examples in our WIPP repository, so we can learn by example. Just we use one existing one and modify them to fit your needs. We also have some documentation, and we also have online plugin manifest generation tool that makes it a bit easier to create new manifests. The plugin manifest is in JSON, and we do have a JSON schema available if you want to check all of the fields and so on. So we looked at the structure of a plugin manifest. So let's look a bit more into detail. So this is a metadata where you specify name, version, description, and the name of the Docker image to use. Inputs. So here we have two inputs. Some of the data types that we support. Collection. This is a keyword for a collection of images. Stitching vector. So this is for the MIST format of stitching vectors. Pyramid, TensorFlow model. So this is actually for any AI model, just that we started with TensorFlow. CSV collection, generic data, what you have a data that does not quite fit in any of the other categories, we can put it into generic data. Notebook, you can also have Jupyter Notebook as an input for a plugin, for example, and you can also display Jupyter Notebooks in WIPP. And then some more basic types like string, number, integer, enum, array, boolean. And output is really similar, except that we don't support the basic types as outputs. And finally, we have the UI, so where we can specify additional information that we want to be displayed in the WIPP UI. Once you have all of that, so you created your, for example, Python's code, you package it into a Docker image, you created a manifest that goes with it so that you know what your plugin does. You can register it in WIPP using this manifest. So that will be, you can go to plugins, new plugins, you can choose the JSON file for your plugin, click on register, and then you will see it appear here. It's available to be used in a workflow. So you can create a new workflow, select your plugin that you just created, fill out the form, so it will be generated based on what you put in the manifest, and then add it and run it. So let me go, I can go quickly to show you what it would look like in real life. So let me just exit. Okay. So sure. So this is the repo that we have for our containerized plugin specification. And we do have some sample tools. So this is what I'm going to show you right now. So we have a cropping tool and a thresholding tool, both in Python. And this is kind of also an example on how to organize your repository if you have WIPP plugins. You have a SRC folder containing the source code, a Docker file, a plugin.json, and it's also always good to add some sample data for testing the plugin. And we do have some instruction on how to do it. So if we look at how we could do that, so we can do a Docker build of our code. So this, I clone the repository, and I now have the Python code here. So we see that we build the Docker image based on the Docker file. So you have multiple steps. It will create the folders in the Docker image. It will run the library installation, get the executable from my machine into the Docker image, and then create it like that. So I can then just test it with the Docker run. So I'm using the same commands that we saw in the presentation. So because I have here under Python threshold, as you can see here, we have sample data, we have some inputs. So this is what I'm going to use for testing. So this is sample data. I'm going to mount that under /data in my plugin. So it means that inside of my container, input images will be available at /data/inputs. Like that. I'm choosing like an arbitrary value of threshold of 1000, and I want the outputs to go to /data/outputs, which means that they will be available in the outputs folder of my machine. So I can run it, I can test it, and I can see that it quickly processed one image. And yeah, I could check the result of this image, for example. And so let me just go to WIPP. So in WIPP, we saw that we have the plugin view. So by default, when you install WIPP, you don't have any plugins. You can add all of the ones that we offer, and you can add your own plugins. And in order to add a new plugin, you have to have the user role of admin or developer in the WIPP system. So we have 3 roles: a regular user, and then an admin, and also a developer that can add new plugins. So in order to add my new plugin, I can choose a plugin manifest. So in my case, I was using the Python threshold. So I can this plugin.json. I will see it appearing here. So I can check, is everything good? Yes, looks good. So I can register. And then I see everything that was in my manifest. It means that now it is available to use in a workflow. So if I wanted to create a workflow, with my newly built plugin, so I can do save. I can add the task. I will look through the plugin to see where is my threshold in plugin. So this is this one with the demo version. I can say it's a thresh task. I will reuse something that we computed in the previous workflow. So for example, the stitch version of our fluorescent datasets. And again, let's use 1000 as the workflow value. So I can add this, I could submit the workflow and then monitor in Argo, and I can look at the execution. So it will download the container from Docker Hub and then run it. And what I would want to do probably is to do the same type of workflow and add some visualization. So if I do the same one, so I can see that I can copy the workflow, get the same thing, just add a task, because now I want to also visualize my results. So I want to use a WIPP pyramid plugin. I'm going to call that pyramid. It will be the result of the previous step. And I want to do some auto contrast and brightness adjustment in order to visualize it properly. So I add that, then I submit. Again, I can go to Argo, monitor what is going on. And if something was to fail, I could check the log and see what is going on. So maybe the input parameters were not good. Maybe it's not able to find the Docker image, for example, if I forgot to push it to Docker. So you can, from here, you can really debug easily, because this is a reality of workflow. Sometimes something doesn't work, and it's good to be able to debug it. So we can see that first step worked, so it was a thresholding, second step was a pyramid, and the last step is a notification back to the WIPP system that what is the status of the workflow. So we can go back here, we can check the outputs. So this is a pyramid, so I see the result of the segmentation using my new plugin that does simple thresholding in Python. Yeah.
You want to show the, we have tools that support creation of the manifest. So to make your life easier, there are two things that we are trying to do. One is to bring the community together and agree on the sections in the manifest. We would like to add more about the hardware. If there is any GPU dependency, we would like to add more about security. Mylene is going to demonstrate how this tool, let's say this web form, can simplify your life. You don't have to know too much about it. You just populate your entries and you have your JSON file that goes along with your Docker image. And then you can just register that as Mylene demonstrated.
Yeah, so this is an online tool that we have available at this address. Basically, it displays a form based on our manifest JSON schema. So you can then fill out this form and it will create the manifest for you that you can then download. So yeah, so if I just want to click it, you see it will be updated. So you can add multiple inputs. So you can select, is my input a collection, a stitching vector? So you don't have to remember all of these keywords. You can just select it here. You can check, is it required or not? You can add multiple inputs. And then you can also specify some of the UI definitions. So the key would be generated for you. Each input will get a new entry here, and you can specify the labels that will appear in WIPP. So for my input images, maybe I want it to be displayed as input collection. In the field where the user chooses which collection they want to use, I want to pick a collection so that it's clear that you have to pick a collection. And then we have some specific things that you can bind the visibility of one input in the form according to one other input. So if you have, for example, thresholding, you could have selection of thresholding method or manual where you put a value. So if you select the manual, then it means that a new entry for a manual threshold value will be appearing on the form, for example. But if you use automatic thresholding method, then you don't need this field, so it will not appear. So yeah, so you can define all of that. You can also define your plugins outputs. So same thing, you can select what type of output you get, a description, and then you could also specify if you know that your plugin needs a minimum of RAM, if you know that it needs some specific CPU capability, if it needs a GPU to run. So you can select all of that, and if hardware requirements are enabled in the WIPP system, it's an option, then it will try to enforce this requirement when it schedules the jobs on the nodes. And once you fill out all of these forms, so you can download the manifest and use it to register your plugins in WIPP. And you can also check, we have a render button. So it allows you to check if your manifest is going to be properly rendered in WIPP job forms. So from this manifest, I can see that in WIPP it will look like that. I can also test like really how it will work. I have a collection, so let's see if autocomplete works here. So it means that my plugin manifest is properly configured and I can use it in WIPP. So you can build a new manifest, but you can also upload an existing manifest to do the validation with the rendering button.
So we believe that for reproducibility purposes, it's very important that your algorithm is described with some of the basic characteristics, especially if there are some hardware dependencies or there is a pointer to a library that you use and so forth. In addition, the UI section is really meant for developers to think of the end users that are not really developers, they are just users, but they have, let's say, the biological knowledge, they don't know how to program, but you have to think of how to present them the input parameters, how to describe them. That's the reason why we have there like a description of what is a collection or a description of what is a input type and so forth. There is also a way how you can create your own manifest and upload it and then just do the verification. Did it pass the test? So these tools, we are thinking more and more what tools to build. We would really like feedback if you think that in order to make it easier for developers, users, and eventually even the system administrators to deploy instances of WIPP, build plugins and use it, and then eventually push all the results and all the workflows to publicly facing web servers, so it becomes shareable, it becomes reusable. We have also invested in the Deep Zoom quite a bit of time into making sure that people can download chunks of data. So you don't have to download terabytes of data. You might just be interested in some subset of cells. So you can go and then download any specific colony or a subregion, channels, and so forth. So that's another thing that from a reproducibility perspective and reusability, so you can build on top of someone else's research, these tools should be available. I think this concludes our presentation. If anyone has questions, maybe we can look at some questions. There is one question. So I'll read the question. The web interface is quite useful, and the fact that some of the data can be visualized is only limited to 2D data, or can handle 3D data, volumetric data.
So the current version only handles 2D data, but this is really something that we have been looking at. So right now, the current work, we have explored linking a neural glancer in terms of 3D visualization. And also we have explored from this view, having two sliders, like one, because this one can handle a temporal sequence, so you can have multiple frames, so you can go through all of the frames. What we have explored is also to add the second slider to go through the Z slices. So it's kind of two things that we are currently exploring.
Second question, can one Docker file have several plugins?
So I guess you mean, so if you have a Docker file and then you have maybe multiple options that do different things, but they are in the same Docker file. So this is something that is possible because as part of the plugin manifest, you can specify a base command. So you can have one plugin manifest that points to the same Docker image saying base command is thresholding, for example. And the second one might be, I don't know, something else. So you can do that. Usually we recommend tagging the same image with different names so that there is no confusion, because this is something that you can do also, right? You can have one Docker file, you build your Docker image based on that, and then you can use tag to retag the same image with different names. So that's also an option that we usually advise, but both options are possible. So
this question is very relevant because we have been collaborating with NCAS and IH, who took the action to take all the ImageJFiji tools and package them in a Docker, in a plugin, so they can be used from WIPP. The challenge is the challenge lies in the granularity of the commands. If you want to have every single thresholding technique as one independent WIPP plugin, or do you want to have one plugin that allows you to choose which particular thresholding method to use? So these are really issues of granularity, because clearly if you package every thresholding technique as a separate container, there is an overhead because you have to transfer the operating system and all the layers they are in a Docker file. But in principle, as Mylene was saying, you can have one Docker file with several functionalities. You just have to figure out how to make them accessible to the end user.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
sure.
Well,
thank you for your questions.
Yeah.
Let me go back.
If anyone has a question, just please unmute yourself, and then we are happy to discuss. And of course, if you are interested in some of these topics that we presented, please register for the workshop. It will be all virtual. We try to accommodate Europe and Asia and the US by making every day only, the workshop will be only 4 hours a day. It will be only virtual, and we just want to get the inputs from the community, how to build these manifests, so your code can be reused with our code and vice versa, and therefore we are not duplicating efforts. And it really doesn't matter where you are running that, as long as the software is containerized and described with these manifests, we should be able to use it on any platform. If you want to use our plugin registry, that would be great, because then we can do federated search. We can find your plugin and again reuse it with our plugins. So that way, kind of the utilization of all the software is going to be much higher. I mean, our email addresses are on the screen. Feel free to send us an email, and then we'll be happy to talk to you more. If there are no questions, I think we are right on time. No more questions? All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone who attended this tutorial. I think it's recorded and it will be available for others. Please feel free to provide pointers to this presentation to others who might be interested but could not attend this talk. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.